Conversations with the Mind podcast, where we explore consciousness through conversations with interesting people. Our mission is to engage the collective mind piece by piece to bring greater clarity of mind to our listeners locally and across the planet, and to contribute to broaden the shared experiential knowledge and wisdom of existence.
All right, folks, welcome back to Conversations with the Mind. I'm your host, as always, Shane LeMaster. And we're here for episode number 81 with very special guest, Professor Mike Bidwell. What's up, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I mean, you're in the middle of Denver, so you're kind of in the middle of all of what's going on right now. I'm
like suburbs. I'm like Lakewood, so like I'm a little bit kind of probably insulated from some of it. But you know, you can hear things at nighttime.
Yeah, I'm up here in Fort Collins, and the only thing that's been going on up here, there's been like two small protests, one at the university and one at the police station. But yeah, man, I can't hear anything except for people lighting off fireworks, and I don't even think that's
fireworks last night. Yeah, interesting.
So the first question that I always ask is always the same to all my guests, and that is, the podcast name is Conversations with the Mind. And I'm wondering, when you hear that phrase, Conversations with the Mind, what comes up for you? What sort of visualizations come up? What sort of meaning does that phrase have with you?
Yeah. So I think probably for me, Conversations with the Mind is a conversation in consciousness for me. A conversation with my higher self, with my ideal self, if it's me. So if I'm by myself, that's it's a moment of pausing for a second and asking myself maybe some really important questions sometimes. It's not so much for me, like, at least it wasn't when I was younger, like sitting in meditation. I've always had a challenge with like traditional meditation. Like I have such a monkey mind, and I think it's what attracted me to Jiu-Jitsu. I'm kind of all over the place, and Jiu-Jitsu allows me to express that. It allows me to, when I grapple, and it wasn't always like this. It took years for me to get to the point where I can recognize that my form of meditation happens more on the mat. And, I could never, when I would try to sit in meditation, my brain would just be all over the place, and I'd have trouble doing that. And so, like, Jiu-Jitsu's allowed me to express that in a way that, like, traditional meditation never could for me.
I find that myself too. It's difficult having been like conditioned in this Western mindset of go, 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 and then stepping back and trying to untangle that to a point where I can sit still and be okay with doing nothing, rather than hearing those voices come in saying you're being unproductive, or you're being lazy, or you're not successful, or all these things that sort of are they're fed by the society that we're taught from. Sure,
like human doing instead of human being.
Yeah,
we get so caught up in that spiral. It's hard to pause, and then we try to pause, and all of these voices come in, and then we feel guilty about it, and we feel like, God, I suck at this. I'm a shitty meditator. I'm not good at this. Not realizing that it's a practice, and that meditation can happen in so many different forms. It doesn't have to be. It can be sitting. I have students a lot ask me, I want to start meditating, but I can't sit still. I can't sit for, 30, 40 minutes. Well, it doesn't have to be 30 or 40 minutes. Maybe it's 1 minute. Maybe at 3 o'clock, you just stop what you're doing, and you become a human being for a moment, and you just take maybe 10 deep breaths, and that's a starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think the idea of meditation, or the ideal place we want to be, is that engagement with that ideal self in our mind, right? Like you were talking about. But when I think of, an ideal self, and there's always like a counterbalance or something to balance out everything in this universe. There's this ideal self, and then there's like this less ideal self too in our mind. So do you ever find yourself engaging in conversations with that self, and how do you navigate that side, that voice that I think we all have?
I think for me, it's like when it's appropriate, if I'm trying to, so like the way that if I want to just sit and meditate, the way that I do it at home is I take a hot bath. like a hot steaming bath, man, and I'll get in there for like an hour. And in that hour, like so much work gets done. You know, sometimes it could be about just sitting, you know, and enjoying the hot bath. And sometimes there's a lot of important questions I have to ask myself. And sometimes it's the conversation with the ideal self. And sometimes it's a conversation with the not so ideal self. But if I'm over here and this guy's poking his nose in there, I don't, you know, ban him from the conversation, but I might say like, maybe not right now. Maybe that's not the topic we want to go to right now. And I've gotten better at that as I've gotten older. You know, that stuff used to keep me up at night. You wake up at night and all of these conversations start happening. And now it's just, not right now. We'll talk about this one later. You know, so a hot bath works for me. And it took me a while to figure that out. Like, it's just something about, you know, resting my muscles, getting my body completely relaxed in one space, and just, you know, having a great conversation with myself.
Yeah,
both, whatever one I need to, you know.
Yeah, and I think that relaxation is so important too, and it probably shows up in your jiu-jitsu. I know it has in mine. You know, when I started out as a white belt or even a blue belt, and I'm probably halfway through my purple belt, you know, I was so engaged with my physical self. I was not relaxed in my rolling. I was very explosive and, you know, muscling things, and that pulled me more into my body, but took me out of my mind. And I thought it was beneficial at the time. But now, you know, I'm a two-stripe brown belt, and so I've slowed way down. And like the less energy I use, the more flow I engage, the more I find myself in that meditative headspace. And it's much, much easier to navigate whatever's going around you, outside of you, but also internally during those matches, when it's nice and smooth and relaxed like that, rather than like tense and working from a place of maybe fear or something like that.
And that's appropriate too. Like, you know, jiu-jitsu has 4 belts, right? We have blue, purple, brown, and black basically. And there's a white belt too, but you have 4 colored belts. And so the way that I've always looked at it is, you mentioned purple belt. Purple belt to me is like, it's like the teenager years. Have all the power of being an adult and all of the responsibility that goes with it, but no experience with it yet. Like, you kind of get it now. Like, you can do all the cool shit. You can choke people and you can kind of make it happen, and you can kind of like beat up on the blue belts and, you know, hang with some of the purple belts, and you can give even the upper belts sometimes a tough time, right? Like, you can drive now for the first time. So you're like a teenager. And so like a teenager is filled with what? They're just a big old kind of ego at that point, right? Like, that's always, I have a 14-year-old daughter, so I'm getting into those teenage years and hormones right now with her. And I see her like that, and she does jiu-jitsu. She's been doing it for like 10 years, but I see her as like that kind of purple belt mindset right now in her life, right? Like, I know all the answers. I got it. I don't need you to feed me anymore, right? And it's like that as a student. Like, I understand how jiu-jitsu works. And then you get to brown belt and you start to slow things down a little bit, right? You're not just filled with that crazy energy all the time. And I always say purple belts are the most dangerous students in the school because they have all the power but none of the experience.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, the white and blue belt were sort of like download belts for me, where white belt, I was downloading information and I didn't quite understand it. Blue belt, I finally learned how to code, and now I can download things and read the code. Purple belt was like, okay, now I have the code. It's more of like an expression, or I got to find my style, you know, like a teenager,
Yeah,
you know, trying to find their way. Where do I fit in? And then brown belt is like, okay, now I've established my style. Now I need to get really, really good at these points in my game to really refine it. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's great to hear your perspective on it.
Belt becomes about, for me, about service. How may I serve now? How may I serve the community? You know, when I was a lower belt, I served myself very well, right? To the point of like ego flares at times, you know, even to the point where, you know, I hate to admit it, where I've hurt people before. And like if I was in a tournament or something and I caught a footlock, I was going to squeeze it, whether they tapped or not. I'm going to crank this as hard as I can. And I've done that before. And now as a black belt, you know, as someone who's trying to serve and serve my students, and it's, you know, and it's not about me, but by doing that, it becomes back about me, right? Like, so the more I serve, the better I feel great about it. It just, it gives me purpose. It gives me outcome. So the more I'm able to serve now, you know, I feel like, you know, I can give back for the first time. And that's a lot of, you know, with the videos and stuff that I put out, you know, on my social media and stuff like that, it came from a place truly of service from the very beginning, you know, and not like comfortable with it at the beginning either. Like I didn't even want to, I'm not like a really super outgoing person in my day-to-day life. I'm kind of shy actually. And I've always been that way my whole life. And it's always been a struggle for me off the mats, being able to just, you know, to talk to other people. You know, it's weird because when I'm in the school, it's like I'm on stage and I can do it and it's me and I'm in my element and it's great. We were just talking about this last night with a couple of students. I was like, man, you guys, we were talking about people being shy. And I said, man, I'm so shy outside of class. And I worry sometimes that like people might think I'm arrogant or something like that. And it's not arrogance. It's just me being like kind of a shy person, you know? And so jiu-jitsu has really helped me a lot to work through that.
Yeah, that's actually the first place that I ever heard of you was through your videos. I mean, I'm approaching 40 years old. I'll be 37 this year. So your BJJ after 40 videos were like, you know, I'm coming into this realization in my mid 30s after having done this for 13, 14 years and MMA also, that like, I got to take care of my body, right? If I want to be able to do this for the rest of my life, I got to learn how to do this as an adult, you know? And so that's how I found out about you first. I'm curious though, like, what is your upbringing with martial arts? Like, how did you get into it? Didn't you come from a different state before you came to Denver?
Yes, I grew up in upstate New York, Syracuse, like upstate. So when you say New York, people always say, oh, you're from New York City. No. Upstate's a whole different like world. Like we were like an 8-hour drive from New York City. Like I'd never been to New York City when I was a kid. So I grew up in upstate New York. I just turned 51 last month. And yeah, thanks. I can't believe I'm 51. It's kind of surreal. I don't feel it, but I do sometimes. But so I grew up in upstate New York, and I've been doing martial arts literally pretty much my whole life. I feel like it was just my path as a kid. Like I just knew it intuitively. Like I was really interested in it. Even when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old, you know, I would go to the library and get books out on martial arts and go in my room and practice martial arts. And I had a friend whose mom signed him up for karate, who's my best friend. My parents couldn't pay for martial arts. You know, my mom and dad got married very young. They've been together since they were 15. They had my brother when they were 17. They were married when they turned 18. So they were very young. And we didn't have the luxury of doing martial arts when we were kids and things like that. So my friend had signed up for karate and he quit after like 2 months. And I begged him for his little student manual. And it had a bunch of moves and stuff. And I thought I had like the secret scrolls now, and I'm going to like master this thing, right? Because I couldn't like sign up for classes. And I would just like practice martial arts, and I would make weapons and nunchucks and, you know, and bow staffs and stuff like that. And then when I was like 12 years old, I was, one summer I was mowing lawns for like a neighbor, this old couple in my neighborhood, and they were going to go away for a couple of weeks. So they gave me $100, $100 bill. It was like the most money I'd ever seen in my life. It was like I won the lottery. I thought I was rich. It's like $100. And so I got on my bike and I rode to a karate school and I signed myself up for karate. And, you know, back then that's all there was. You know, this is, you know, back in the early 80s, even before the Karate Kid. And, you know, so I went to a karate school, signed myself up for lessons, and I've literally not stopped since then. You know, I was addicted to it and I didn't care. You know, I would tell girls when I met them, it's like, listen, if we're going to date, martial arts is the most important thing in my life. So you have to understand that this takes precedence over everything, you know? So that's how I always looked at it. It was the most important thing in my life since, you know, for the last 40 years.
That's impressive. That's actually what I told my wife before we got married too, that, you know, jiu-jitsu is my top priority. She's a great, you know I found the right one when she totally understands that. And, you know, she knows that it's my therapy, it's my spiritual place, it's my sanctuary, and she'll beg me to go. If I'm being grumpy, she'll like, you need to go to jiu-jitsu, you know, and so I love that. And your upbringing is similar to mine in that, you know, I did it since I was 4 years old, a variety of different styles, loved it, loved watching movies and Ninja Turtles and all that stuff, and play fighting. But for me, what I noticed is, you know, as I reflect back, you know, my martial arts journey sort of the motivation behind it shifted over time, right? So when I'm 4 or 5 years old, I was just in it because I think my mom wanted to get rid of me for a couple hours, and I was just having fun moving. And then I get to middle school, and I'm in wrestling and martial arts still, and I'm, getting bullied at school. So then it becomes like, well, I need to do this to protect myself, right? And then through high school too, more wrestling, and then it dropped off. When I found drugs and alcohol and became, alcoholic in my mid-20s. And then I found martial arts again in my undergrad, in my 20s, and found Buddhism at the same time that I rediscovered martial arts. And from that point on, martial arts has been more of a spiritual journey for me, really, a way for me to push myself and grow internally more so than externally, even though that's like a side benefit now. So I've noticed that like my motivation in martial arts has shifted over time. Did you notice anything like that as well? Because you seem like you're very, in all your videos and things like that, and that's what I think drew me to you is your engagement of the spiritual aspect in what you do. And I don't see a lot of practitioners these days engaging that part. Back in the day, that was such an important part of martial arts, is spiritual.
I think comes from traditional martial arts. People brought up that way. It was different when I was a kid and we walked into school, and I still do this. I'm at my school right now. The first thing that I did when I walked in here this morning, there's no one here except for me, and I bowed. And for me, that's like, I'm not bowing to a person. I'm bowing to myself. I'm clearing out the calculator. It's time for jiu-jitsu right now. I'm going to focus on this one thing. And there's not a lot of things in life where you can have this single point of focus that's so intense that if you're not focused, you're grappling somebody, you're fighting, you're going to get kicked in the head. You're going to get submitted, right? So like it forces you down to this single point of focus. And it becomes very spiritual, because even if you come into this not wanting it to be spiritual, I think a lot of times, depending on how you're brought up, your teachers, it kind of rubs off on you. And then you start noticing it in your life. How many times does another student come to you and say like, man, like I had this thing happen to me at work and it was so stressful. And I just kept thinking like, if I can get through jiu-jitsu, man, I can do this. Right. So there's the stoic part of it, right? I call it being like Spock, when you're training. Sometimes you need to be like Spock, right? Sometimes you need to let all your emotions out, let it all fly too. But sometimes you need to be like Spock. And so like, it allows you to carry over these lessons into your daily life. And it's hard not to, because they're so blatant and so powerful. It's a peeling back of the layers. And that's what it was for me over the years, a peeling back of the layers. I've always was interested in the spiritual aspect of it. I think especially early on, but then when I started jiu-jitsu, I kind of lost that for a while. Like I just, I was doing when I was doing jiu-jitsu or started jiu-jitsu, I was already doing traditional martial arts. I had a school at that point and I was running classes, and I had signed up for an MMA fight in 1996 in Virginia. And I went to this, I hadn't done any jiu-jitsu at this point. I didn't know anything about ground fighting or anything like that. And I went and fought in this MMA match. And I lost to a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. And the next day I went down to Mario Yamasaki's school, the referee in the UFC, Mario Yamasaki, right? And got hooked on it. But when I got hooked on it, I just suddenly I said, no more traditional martial arts. I'm done with all of that crap. And that's how I looked at it, like a bunch of crap now. I'm done with it all. I'm a jiu-jitsu guy, and this is all that I'm going to do. And I was kind of arrogant about it at that point. I think that was part of, jiu-jitsu at that time too. Like in 1996, it was like the Gracie Challenge, and like, we would talk shit about traditional martial arts now, and we sort of became very arrogant about it. And I think I've really over the years have come full circle with that now. I see the value in my traditional martial arts. It comes through so much in my training. People sometimes see my videos and they're like, oh man, you flow so good, you're so smooth or whatever. And honestly, you know where that comes from? Doing forms. Doing katas. People talk so much crap about that. Oh, that stuff's stupid. Like in forms, like if you do traditional martial arts for somebody that doesn't do martial arts, forms means you're doing these it's like a pattern of movements, but there's no person there, right? So as jiu-jitsu guys, we look at that and we say, that's not real fighting. Well, that's not what it's meant for either. It's a movement, right? So like that's really transcended into my my now version of jiu-jitsu, which wasn't like this, before, so all of those traditional elements, I think, have really like added to and not taken away from what I do.
Yeah, it's almost like forms are kind of like shadow boxing, right? For a Thai fight or something, right?
Shadow boxing's not a real fight.
Right.
It wouldn't be like, that's so stupid. Look at that guy over there punching the air. What a dummy. It's like, no, that's a form of practice, right? Just like when we get on the mats by ourselves, and a lot of meditation for me sometimes is like stretching, moving about the floor, stretching and moving my body and going through positions and submissions and techniques. I realize that's not a real fight, but I'm also training myself for that too.
Yeah, I agree. And I've found the same thing, some of the lessons learned from traditional martial arts have certainly carried forward. It's, especially around like discipline and tradition and things like that. And, I see people come into the jiu-jitsu gym now who don't have any martial arts background and no idea what it means to, respect, bow on and off, mop the mats for your coach, give back to the school. And these are all things that came from those more traditional styles. So that's something that I'm not so happy about with sort of the American version of jiu-jitsu, is that we are losing a lot of those traditions from even, Brazilian jiu-jitsu or Japanese jiu-jitsu. But, there's a lot of benefits too from how America has taken it to a whole new level and like evolved it, and it continues to evolve. So there's good and bad sides to it.
Yeah, and I always look at it, it's like Baskin Robbins. There's a lot of flavors, and there's flavors for everyone, in the jiu-jitsu world. You have like some schools that are like, we just focus on self-defense, right? We don't do any of that tournament crap, and we don't go upside down. It's just, traditional self-defense. And then you have people that are like, no, we're the tournament guys. We berimbolo, we turn upside down. We do a lot of creative, crazy stuff that maybe doesn't transcend into this reality. Right. And so there's sort of this struggle sometimes in jiu-jitsu, this resistance with each other, versus like the way that I present it to my students is, let's be open to all realities. Right. I think we're pretty intelligent enough to know that like there's certain techniques that are good. There's certain, you wouldn't use a hammer when you need a screwdriver. Right. So different tools work for different things. So like maybe something on a real street self-defense scenario, different set of tools. I'm in the school, I'm on the mats with my homies, I might turn upside down, I might do something that I know isn't going to work on the streets. But in jiu-jitsu, we get so judgmental about all that stuff, instead of like, being smart enough to realize there's different realities, there's different tools. And sometimes I don't want to worry about self-defense. I don't need to carry that burden with me all the time, right? You've met those people, right? Like, I had a guy before that wanted to do private lessons with me a couple of years ago. And he said, I only want to wear street clothes in my private lessons because I want to be able to defend myself. And he had this big burden that he carried about being attacked, to the point where he wanted me to attack him. He said, listen, I want you to, like, sometime in my life in the next couple of weeks, I want to get jumped. And I want you to attack me, right? Now when you hear it, you're like, well, that's kind of weird, man. That's pretty intense, right? And so what eventually what it became was no uniform, street clothes, to eventually like a normal jiu-jitsu guy wearing a gi, eventually got his blue belt, continues to train. And sometimes you meet those people, you're like, I don't know if I want to teach this guy. This is kind of weird, man. I'm not into this. This is not my thing. But I knew that we could get there. I knew that we just had to cross this bridge to get to where he needed to be, and use this as an opportunity to really help this guy to maybe release some of this fear that he's carrying about being attacked, right? So yeah, it was kind of interesting to see, that evolution for somebody, that potential, right, that we have in this art to really transform someone's life.
Yeah, I agree. It certainly transformed my life. I know that jiu-jitsu has been a major component in me maintaining my sobriety. Actually, in a few days, I'll have 11 years.
Hey, that's awesome.
Alcohol-free. Yeah, that was the demon in my life, and having that level of introspection to recognize that was the part of the equation that needed to be removed in order to balance it. That came largely from martial arts and being able to do that. You talk about this balance between sport jiu-jitsu and more like combat jiu-jitsu or self-defense. And one of my first MMA instructor, one of my most, I guess, profound mentors in my life. He was a black belt in Sambo, and Michael Sullivan, he's down there in Broomfield also with Fuse Fox and Sambo 1. And he always, he come from a traditional martial arts background, hardcore Sambo, a lot of, hardcore karate with, not just point fighting, but full contact matches, things like that. And so he really showed me, the power of traditional martial arts if they're done properly, and that they can, they're not just these movements, but they can be really powerful. So when he was teaching me, Sambo and ground game, when I was getting introduced to it, he would always have this component in there where he would stop the class in the middle of a movement and provide context and say, don't do this on the street. If there's other people around, they're going to totally wreck you, or something like this, right? And so that's kind of my style now as I'm starting to get into that service place. My professor has me acting as a coach, so I'll teach class twice a week. And for my classes, I like to have a good mix between self-defense and sport, where I'll set the stage and I'll let students know, like, this is a street self-defense move, or this is a sport move, or even when we're rolling, I kind of embrace Jocko Willink's philosophy, where we'll be rolling, and if I have someone's back or something and they're just not moving, I might do like a quick eye swipe or something and just say, like, you could have just lost an eye there if we're on the street or something like that, just to build awareness that, you need to be protecting vital organs even when you're, in a sport match, because it can be useful on the street too. So I like to integrate both of those, because it is a skill set that transcends just use on the mat. It follows you everywhere you go.
Yeah, and it's truly like, what separates jiu-jitsu, and there's a lot of things that separate it from traditional martial arts, but one of the things that really sticks out to me as it becomes more about service for me is that there's a lot of really like normal people that want to learn this. And there's people like our age, just people in their 30s and 40s and people older than me that want to do this. And they're not always going to be able to do like all of the things a 21-year-old can do, nor should they do it. But there's a path for them too. And sometimes, a lot of it can be self-defense. But it's, I think it offers something truly for the masses. But it has to be taught in a responsible way that addresses those things, it is different at 40, it is different at 50, I have no idea what it's going to feel like at 60, but I do realize that BJJ after 40 starts at 20 years old and 30 and 40 and 50, right? Like, it's a path that you have to create for yourself, because if it's not sustainable right now, it's definitely not sustainable in 10 years for you, right? So like, there has to be a path that, individually works for each person. It's going to be a little bit different for everybody, because we all come to this with, different sets of circumstances. We're all a little bit different. We may come to this, with a bad back or a bad neck, or, some emotional, thing too, or whatever it happens to be. And so a lot of that stuff, we have to address that for each person and give them a path that makes sense, that is sustainable, not just in the present moment, but, it's got to outlive the present moment. So I always remind my students that whatever you do today has to outlive today. Like, you need to be able to walk tomorrow. You got to go to work tomorrow and the next day. And it can't be that you're constantly, feel like you're put together with, duct tape and bandages, and popping ibuprofen all the time. Like, it's got to be a sustainable path that honors and respects your body. So like, if you put all of this work into your body today, how am I going to serve myself tomorrow or when I get home tonight? What's the service part of it now for my body? What's the conversation like with my body? Is it my bad knee? Is that what I call this now? My bad knee? And this is the good one? I don't feel like that very much, right? He doesn't want to be called the bad knee or the bad shoulder, right? So it's not even just, it's the conversation that we're having between our ears about how we treat our body and how we respect our body or don't respect our body. And when you're young doing the, and if it's whatever it is, whether it's martial arts or you're into competitive whatever, right? If you want to do this in 20 or 30 years, there's got to be a path that makes sense. And it doesn't mean you can't do all the cool stuff that all the kids are doing, all the cool young kids are doing. You can do that stuff, but there's got to be, some balance to the equation. How may I serve myself now too,
Yeah, and I found too that as I age and as I accumulate certain injuries, my game changes, and I have to remain flexible enough to let go of certain movements that I can no longer do anymore, but also know that, there are a lot of movements that I can do. Like in my 20s, flying arm bars were a regular thing, but now in my mid 30s, I take it a little easy on the flying movements. And I can't do rubber guard as well as I used to because 9 knee surgeries and things. But there's other things that I can do that others still can't, even with my limitations. And I think that's a big part of jiu-jitsu. A big humbling aspect is getting through challenges and getting through what we may perceive as our weaknesses to find those strengths, to find our own style, to find a system that works for us in our own body. But I love what you said about, thinking forward with your training and not just focusing on today, but focusing on, how is this building me towards what I want to be in the sport, and actually having a vision for what you want to achieve.
Yeah, that's important too. And being, like you said, flexible with yourself and not judging the fact that I'm getting older, right? The great thing about becoming, older is that we do become wiser, or at least there's the opportunity for that. There's an opportunity for growth that maybe you can't experience when you're younger. It's like the older I get, I'm still asking the same questions, a lot of the same questions, but the answers start to change a little bit too, right? The question that I asked when I was 20, who am I? Why am I here? Who am I? Why am I here? I'm getting different answers now. And it starts to change a little bit, with each decade or with each year. It just seems like it's a different answer now. So it's important to constantly be provoking myself with those questions again and again, not when I was 20, but what's it look like at 30 and 40 and 50 and so forth, right?
That's a great question. One of my favorites to ask myself: who am I and what am I here for? And it's multifaceted, right? So you can take it in the jiu-jitsu sense, like, why are you here? Well, you said to provide service now, right? But taking it bigger out to the macro, what are your thoughts now at 51 of who is Mike Bidwell, and what are you here for in a universal cosmic sense? That's a big question, right?
And just in my physical sense right here, it's different looking now than I did at 40. Anybody who knew me 10 years ago, if they hadn't seen me in 10 years, they go, whoa, dude, what happened, man? Like, I used to shave my head. I didn't have any tattoos. I didn't have long hair. Like it was a very different person. And so, the moment of, one of the many moments of inspiration, maybe desperation, when I was in my early 40s was, who am I? Why am I here? And the answer at that point was to flow Mike Bidwell for the first time, to flow me. And I even had this moment where I came home one day and I said to my wife, I'm so excited. I got to share something with you. I can't believe this. Took her in the bedroom, sat her down in the bed, and I go, guess what? She's like, what? I'm going to flow Mike Bidwell. For the first time, I'm going to flow Mike Bidwell. I'm going to change everything about myself. I'm going to be the person that maybe I envisioned when I was younger, right? The first half of my life was like Republican, and I voted for George Bush, and I was very shaved head, military. I was in the military, and I was an MP. I was going to become a cop. You know what I mean? I was very different then. There's nothing wrong with those things, but that was a different version of me that served me for my first half of my life. Very different than the person I am today. I never touched cannabis until I was 32 years old, not once. I grew up in the 80s. I listened to Nancy Reagan. She said, don't do it. And I didn't do it, right? And so I was very different the first half of my life from a very physical standpoint, but also from a very mental standpoint. And then I shifted, and that was at 40, and it's different now at 52. Who am I and why am I here? I am Mike Bidwell in this physical reality. I am a spiritual being having a human experience versus a human being having a spiritual experience. I feel that now, and I really sense that for multiple reasons, and multiple moments of, huge shifts in who I am. And that's probably the big part of it now, is that and also understanding the perfect constraints and the perfect borders of this right now. How can my consciousness, my consciousness here in my heart and my gut, how can that experience all of this 3D reality to its fullest with the perfect constraints that I'm in right now, the perfect set of borders? And that's probably a lot of, and being in love with who I am, and not feeling like, a lot of times when we have these big experiences, like a psychedelic experience, right? We feel that ego dissolve, and we say, oh, that's what has to happen now. That's what's got to happen. I felt that. So now when I'm back in my normal 3D reality, that's what's got to happen now. My ego needs to dissolve. And maybe in certain aspects, maybe so, but also being okay with all of those constraints right now, the ego included.
Yeah, were you always a spiritual person, or did you find a particular tradition that sort of hooked you in?
I was always searching for it. When I was, it all, the first shift I remember when I was about 32. I had come off from a failed marriage. It wasn't like we fought all the time or had a horrible relationship. We just weren't in love. We were just kind of roommates hanging out together. I didn't feel it. It just didn't seem right? There was no spirituality there. And so when that relationship ended, I became very interested in Buddhism, even to the point where I went to a retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh back then.
Nice. It
was pretty awesome. That had a huge shift in me. And then and right about that same time, I met my wife that I'm married to now, and we have children and a family, and we've been together for 15 years. And I met her through martial arts. So she was already a martial artist. So we met at a seminar out here in Colorado. That's how I ended up out here. And so that, there was this interest. And when I met her, she had just come back from Nepal. We had 15 years between us too. I'm 15 years older than her. And I met her when she was 19, which people are like, oh my God, yeah, I was 32 and she was 19. And she had just graduated, a year before, got through high school, and she went to Nepal and taught English there. And so the stars were kind of aligned for us. And so I was very interested in Buddhism, and we had a Buddhist wedding. And that was it, so there's a lot that I've learned from, that tradition, but I don't limit myself to one thing. I still appreciate Buddhism very much, but it's not like a practice like it was when I was 30, where I really got into it and I wanted to learn everything about it. And I was going to a Sangha every week, and it was just a huge part of my life. Where now I'm just more just open to anything that comes to me now.
Yeah, I'm the same, more eclectic these days, where I incorporate Native American spiritualism, shamanism from South America. I incorporate Buddhism, Hinduism, all these things. It's when you were talking about dissolving the ego and things like that, Buddhism is what comes to mind right away. That's a great instruction manual on how to do that and what that's going to look like and how to go about it. But psychedelics have been one of my best tools to do that, as well as jiu-jitsu. I get my ego dismantled every day, but I also acknowledge what you said too, that it's not about, once you get into this this journey of trying to dissolve the ego all the time, once you've experienced that a couple of times, you come to realize that the ego serves a purpose. The ego's there for a reason. The ego doesn't need to disappear, but rather we need to come into a different relationship with our ego, and not have our ego be running the show, but rather just be one of those tools that we can pull out when it's needed.
Yeah, and you can have a healthy relationship with your ego too.
Totally.
Maybe not sometimes when you're 20 years old, maybe not always, right? I definitely felt like my relationship wasn't as healthy then with my ego. But now as I've gotten older, I see its purpose, and I see how it does serve me. And it doesn't have to be this overbearing thing, versus it's a healthier relationship than it's ever been.
Yeah. I really like that. It seems more harmonious to to accept the ego rather than to try and reject it, like some traditions say.
It's part of these perfect constraints.
Yeah, it's part of the balance. If you remove it, then everything's going to be, out of kilter. So I wanted to ask you too about, American culture and martial arts and, warriorship, right? So I'm a big fan of like historical warrior cultures, samurai in particular, but Vikings and Spartans and all these things. And it seems like today, in today's world, besides the military, warrior culture is lacking, especially through the civilian population. Whereas back in the day, there was a warrior class, there was warrior rules in the Bushido code that people abided by, and now it's sort of like missing. And a lot of the students that come into my school seem to be, whether they know it or not, they seem to be seeking some sort of garden to cultivate warriorship in some way, whether it be actual fighting or warriorship as a parent, or warriorship as a student. So for you, I mean, do you see that too, like sort of a lacking of warriorship? And if you do, like, what do we do about that? I think we could benefit from bringing some of those aspects back.
Because like if you think about, I love the samurai culture. Like I love that. Like I've been to Japan and like I love the idea of it. I love all of the romance around it. You know what I mean? Everything about it. Like I always say, like if I could have been born in some other time, I would want to have been a samurai warrior. It's part of why I wear my hair like this. I look at this. This is my top knot. People are like, oh, is that your man bun? I was like, oh, don't say that word. This is my top knot, man. Samurais don't have man buns. And this to me is a representation of warriorship in my life. This is what this represents for me. And and I love the adornment of those symbols, that allow me to remind me of who I am as a person. And when I put my hair up, when I'm training, like I pull my hair up into a top knot, it's part of the process of becoming a warrior again. Putting on my gi, my uniform, tying my belt. Every step of that to me is stepping into that role of being the warrior now, and and I think that's important. It's important for me in martial arts. I do think we've lost some of that, and mostly because like we're not in battles, like we don't in the traditional sense. We're not out with swords, fighting people and battling our homes and things like that. Or maybe we are right now. I don't know, but whether we are or not, there's moments in our life where we can apply these lessons, right? So everything on the mat has an opportunity to bridge itself into our daily life. And I think our job or the potential for us as teachers and passing on the art is to give that back to our students too. And it's little things like, I don't ask my students to bow when they walk into school. I never once say, you got to bow, man. What's your deal, dude? You're not bowing. I never say that. But I set the example for them. And whether they follow or not, it's okay. For me, it's, I need to clear the calculator. But they might see that and go, wow, I wonder why he does that. And they might ask me somebody, why do you bow? And it's just like in understanding why do we bow? Where does that even come from, right? I wrote an article about this a couple of years ago called Why We Bow. And one of the things that was interesting that came from that article was dogs do what they call a play bow, right? You ever playing with your dog and they kind of drop down and they bow for a moment? That signal means I'm here to have fun. Don't take it too serious what's about to happen right now. Like, don't take it too serious. Let's play. Let's have fun. And so in our reality of jiu-jitsu, whenever we start a match, what do? We slap and we bump. That's our play bow. Don't take it too serious. Let's have fun. Let's play right now. Let's have a good time. And that's sort of become what the bow is now for us in jiu-jitsu. But we have to and we all honor and respect that. No one starts until you slap and bow. What happens in a tournament, right? You have to slap and bump, right? It's funny, right? But it's kind of the thing. And so that's an opportunity to extend that warriorship on the mats. Reminding people, why do we slap and bump? What's that all about? Well, it's kind of like a bow. We're here to have fun. It sets the tone for things. But the warriorship can extend in so many ways into our daily life, and so many opportunities to use it as an opportunity for growth. If I can survive someone laying on top of me, squishing me, dripping sweat in my face, I can get through work. I can get through that traffic. I can get through that guy flipping me off and having a meltdown in his car. I don't have to get sucked into that, because I realize when I'm on the mats, if someone's going real hard, I know the answer is not me going harder. I notice that when I'm training, and that when I get really mad sometimes and I try to force something, it doesn't work. It never works, does it? Ever?
No, usually it ends in injury for me.
Yeah, for all of us. But we learn that, and then we realize me getting upset in traffic and flipping out and engaging in that really isn't serving me right now, and it's certainly not serving them. So I can, take a different path maybe.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, almost all my injuries that I've had, serious injuries, have been from me trying to force my way into a position that was just not right. And you're absolutely right. Like, I take that into my everyday life. And now when, I'm at work and I'm or at school right now, and I'm faced with the decision of like, what do I do here? Well, I could force it, or I could just kind of go with the flow. Well, what have I learned about forcing it in the past? I'm probably going to come out injured in some way, emotionally or mentally or spiritually or whatever. So I'm just going to not force this thing. And I tell you what, like, since I've been working on sort of relaxing into life a little bit more rather than trying to control life, and really embody some of those jiu-jitsu philosophies, I found that life is so much easier and so much more joyful and so much more beautiful. There's so much more to be grateful around once you stop and recognize that. And that's part of, that warriorship. I think there's so many components to what it means to be a warrior, and people can be warriors even if they're not martial artists. It's more about the values and the morals and the ethics that you hold yourself to. And like you said, leading by example. Are you walking the walk, or are you just talking the talk?
Yeah, and absolutely. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be martial arts. There's so many opportunities for all of us to move through this gracefully, to plant our feet, to root ourselves in the present moment, and to take a moment, and not just be looking into this telescope of this, all the time here, but maybe sitting that down for a moment and seeing everything again. You're part of the same age as me, where like remember when there weren't cell phones? We'd just be sitting somewhere, looking around at stuff, checking out the world, looking at the trees, watching people move about, breathing the air, and then all of a sudden we became it became this tunnel that blocked out all of this. Have you seen people like that walking?
Oh yeah. Or
you're at a light at an intersection at nighttime, and you see the glow on the forehead coming off from the phone, right? This light reflecting back. We become so distracted.
Yeah, and I think more reactive these days than responsive. And that's another thing I've learned from jiu-jitsu too. When you're rolling, in the beginning, you're just reacting, right? You're bridging with or you're posting with an arm when you feel like you're about to go over. You're blocking with the leg when you feel like you're about to go over. But the higher up you get, it becomes less reactive. I mean, you still got to react and know how to react properly, but it becomes more responsive. Like, okay, I'm going to put my hand out here, but why am I putting my hand right here in this spot? And what do I need to be aware of that they could use against me if I put my hand here versus 6 inches to the left? And it's being able to apply that to daily life, where you can not just, react at, and especially with what's going on right now, right? With coronavirus and with Black Lives Matter and all this stuff, the riots, you can't just be reactive to whatever you're hearing. You have to investigate. You have to understand why you're making the decision to protest, why you're making the decision to loot, why you're making the decision to live in fear amidst coronavirus rather than going on with your life and seeking beauty, and I think that's lacking, and that's what kind of scares me too. I'm a mental health professional, so I look at society now, and it's a bit scary. Like, it's good that things are happening and change is happening, and this is speeding up change, but it's also kind of scary to see how most people are reacting out of fear, and it's not a response, it's just a reaction.
Yeah, it's easy to look at these times and maybe say, feels like an apocalypse, yeah. Right? And then if you actually trace the the word apocalypse, right? You look at what does that word mean? And then you look back to the traditional Middle English origin of that word. It means to reveal something in a dramatic fashion, to uncover something.
So it is an apocalypse.
It's not the end, right? So we always, in our generation, you know, the modern version of that word is it's the end. Shit, man, this is the end, man. There's all kinds of bad shits happen. It's the apocalypse, and I'm terrified. How am I going to live through this? You know, like we think maybe from a biblical standpoint, we think that's revelations. Well, what does the word revelations mean? It means to reveal something, to uncover something. Not like necessarily the end of something, but maybe the end of something. Maybe things need to change a little bit right now. So maybe it's an opportunity for growth right now, and for some positive. Maybe we do need to have an apocalypse. We've been under this hypnosis for a long time. Maybe we need to wake up for a moment, and maybe this whole Corona thing allowed us to do that for some of us, maybe not for everybody. Some people might be just living in fear. Some people might already be post-apocalyptic and rebirthed, right? And use this as an opportunity for something better. Or maybe you live in fear the whole time and you hide behind your mask, right? So, you know, it's easy to get caught up in that spiral of it right now. And fear. And if you listen to social media or the media in general, you're probably going to get really, really scared right now.
Yeah, I think the media is probably the media and people who put out the media's talking points from the White House are probably fueling more of this than actual hatred going on, you know. But I've never heard that definition of apocalypse, and I just love it because hopefully this is an end to the world as we knew it before, you know, and a rebirthing for everybody. You know, we should all be taking this as an opportunity to learn about our impact on the environment, how we treat each other, how we treat ourselves, what is really important in our lives, right? And Corona gave us a great opportunity to reconnect with that. And I keep trying to promote that and push that out there, that perspective, because there's a lot of people that are still, you know, lost and kind of stuck in that. But I love that definition of, you know, this is the end of something, but that can be a good thing too, because it opens up opportunities for something new.
Yeah, it can be an opportunity. You know, maybe we need to get all of our leaders together and have them all do ayahuasca, you know, or mushrooms. You know, I think maybe it's time for that. You know, maybe we can all have a huge awakening right now, collectively.
Yeah,
and of us.
So let's talk a little bit about psychedelics, if you're okay with that. So what you just said brings up two things for me. Number one, it reminds me of there was this particular CIA research project that was done, I think, in the 50s, where the United States government dosed an entire French town with LSD and just kind of watched what would happen if they were to use something like that, a hallucinogen, on an entire population. And, you know, a lot of bad shit happened. People killed themselves. You know, there was a lot of bad shit that happened. So it reminds me of sort of like this, we need this collective healing, and maybe psychedelics might be a route to that for some people. And it also reminds me of an idea that I've had recently in talking within my own psychedelic professional circles is possibly, we know that MDMA works great for PTSD and healing trauma and things like that. But if it, you know, and when it becomes a legally prescribed medication in the next couple of years, maybe using it on a community level where you can offer, you know, say there's gang violence in a particular city or riots like what's going on now, then we can offer and say, hey, you know, this time on this day at this church location, you're more than welcome to come for a community healing. You know, there'll be MDMA distributed, and then real empathic conversations could happen and almost transcend a lot of the hatred feelings that a lot of people are feeling. I feel like that could be a possibility.
No, I agree. You know, I think it has the potential for change for each of us on a personal micro level, like, and that can extend out into your whole, you know, your whole life. You know, it has for me. completely changed my life and changed a lot of things about me, so it definitely has that potential, I think, for people.
So how has if whatever you're comfortable with, how has psychedelics influenced your life, and what sort of experiences can you share that have been really informative?
Of course, I love talking about it. I don't have my first half of my life was very different. I never touched cannabis until I was 32 years old. Never did one drug in my life or anything like that. I rarely even drank, and I don't drink now. It's a rare occasion. And I never did any of that stuff. I was raised, like I said, to fear it. I remember very distinctly watching an after school special in like the early 80s and seeing, I think it was Holly. Who's the chick from Twister? Remember the movie Twister? Holly,
no.
Is it not Holly Hunt? What is her name? I can't remember her name.
Helen Hunt. Helen Hunt.
Thank you. I'm not Holly Hunt. Helen Hunt. I remember that she was in this after school special. So back then, people that are a little bit younger don't remember these, but they'd have these little after school specials, and there was always it was like a little movie they would show when you got home from school, and it was like some lesson to be learned. And I remember she was doing drugs, and she jumped out of a window. Right, that was always the fear back then. If you did LSD, you were going to jump out of a window, right? And so she jumped out. The whole thing ended with her breaking through the glass and landing on the ground with blood all over her. And that was my, my reference point for drugs, for things like that. I remember one kid when I was 12 years old offering me weed to smoke a joint with him. And I was like, no. Then I hid from him forever. I didn't want to be friends with him anymore because he was a bad kid. And I was a martial artist, my older brother got into a lot of that stuff and things, but I never did that stuff. I was a good boy. I was, a martial artist, and that was my passion. I didn't, wasn't interested in that stuff. I was a whole person. And so I never did any kind of psychedelics or anything like that. In fact, I never did the psychedelics until about a year and a half ago for the first time. And I'll tell you the story because it's an interesting one. So when all of the decriminalization in Colorado started happening, I was like, well, what is this deal with mushrooms? My wife and I would joke about it. I always, she had done mushrooms when she was younger and experimented with different things. And I'd always say, hey, we should do mushrooms sometime, and for years she would I don't know if that's right for you. And I've done them, you probably don't want to do them. With your personality, you might have a bad trip. It might not be good for you. So I was always whoa, I don't want to have a bad trip. That sounds really scary, So we never messed with that, as a couple. I'd use cannabis, and I use that from a medical standpoint for depression. I've had a lot of problems with depression throughout my life and anxiety and things like that. And I was even on medication for a long time for depression. And I finally got off the medication and used cannabis as a way to heal myself. And that's about it, nothing other than cannabis. And so a year and a half ago, my wife got pregnant. And we have two kids already. I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. And we weren't trying to get pregnant at the time, but we weren't not trying. We hadn't used birth control in 10 years. So we never gotten pregnant. So we just, it's just what it was. We weren't getting pregnant. And my wife got pregnant. And, we were very excited about it. And we shared it with all of our students and everybody in our life. We're pregnant. We're going to have a baby. We were so excited. And right after the first trimester, my wife had a miscarriage. And I'm almost getting choked up talking about it. It was very traumatic for us. When you get pregnant like that and have that loss, it's powerful. And you get excited and you fall in love with the baby right away. You're a parent, you know this.
I'm not a parent yet, but we're gonna start next year after my wife graduates.
Yeah, so I thought you were. So then you will know this, you will experience this, and there's no way to experience the love for a baby, even a baby in the womb, especially if you've had children, like we had that experience with our first two, and we were so excited, and then you have that loss, and it's like, it's powerful, right? It was powerful for us. And we weren't sure, do we want to have kids again? You know, after we had this loss, do we want to try this again? Because if we try it and it doesn't happen, like we have another miscarriage, man, do we want to go through this again emotionally, this loss? And so there was that moment of like, you know, are we going to do this again? Or are we not going to do it again? And so at the same time, all of this was going on. You're hearing about mushrooms in the news, you know, and decriminalization. So I started looking into, and I listened to Joe Rogan, you know, and got interested in it and learning about it and researching and watching YouTube videos and like reading and learning and learning and learning and learning. And I, you know, said, okay, let's look into doing mushrooms together. Let's see what happens. But let's just put the intention out there to the universe. I didn't know where you get mushrooms. You know what I mean? I know where you can get weed at a dispensary, but like, where do you get mushrooms from? I don't have those kind of connections in my life. You know, so it wasn't like, you know, we had some avenue to even obtain mushrooms or anything like that. So let's put the intention out to the universe. So I spent a day meditating on mushrooms. I like to draw. That's how I meditate a lot too, or how I work through my goals is I get a sketch pad and I just sit and draw. I like to draw. So I was drawing mushrooms and drawing out my goals and my intentions. And, you know, if mushrooms are going to come to us, they'll come to us. And so I had this conversation with a couple friends. You know, I was talking to one guy and somebody else was standing nearby. And I was telling him about, you know, about mushrooms and like maybe my intention with this. And the other guy standing nearby said, hey, I have mushrooms at home. I have a whole bunch of them. You can have all of them if you want. Oh, okay. And it was beautiful because I didn't want to go buy mushrooms. I wanted that if it was going to come to us, I wanted to honor and respect it, and that it would come to us in a way that like isn't like a drug deal. And it was this beautiful moment where like it came into our life, and there it was. Okay, here they are now. So my wife and I planned a trip up to the mountains to do our mushroom trip together.
The best place.
Yeah. And so it gets crazier. So to me, like numbers have a lot of meaning. They never used to, but they've gained a lot of meaning in my life the last 2 years. And the number 222 comes to me all the time. It's a really strange moment in my life. At first, I thought I was crazy. You know, I was like, this is really weird. Like, because it would come to me in these moments of like, not just like all the time, but like really powerful moments. Something would happen, then boom, there's 222 again. Weird, right? And, you know, you could say it's a coincidence, but man, it was short happening a lot, to the point where my wife was like, that's really weird. And I'm like, I know it's really weird. It keeps happening all the time. You know, I think somehow, you know, the universe has a way of, you know, guiding us using signposts sometimes to allow us to see certain things. So we went up to the mountains to stay at a hotel. We check in. What room is it? It's room 222 that we're staying in. I didn't have a picture of it. Like I took a picture of it. I was like, this is weird. I was like, okay, so this is a good start to the weekend. You know, this is interesting. I wonder what's going to happen. So we did a mushroom trip together. We did, you know, a heroic dose, and it was the first time I'd ever done it before. And it was like the most powerful experience of my life. It completely shifted me and shifted us as a couple. It was incredibly powerful. The moment of just feeling complete unconditional love for the first time just wiped me out, man, like emotionally, like just crying, like just this sense of oneness, this powerful, powerful thing. And the entire trip became mostly about the miscarriage, this baby. And it came through to us to my wife, that she was having this really, it was interesting. Like the whole experience was really like about that, and going through that and healing and realizing, you know, that this baby just wasn't ready to come into our life yet. You know, sometimes babies aren't ready. and baby wasn't ready. And we got this very powerful message that we should try again. You should try again. And you're going to have a son. And I want you to name your son Orez. It's 0 backwards. O-R-E-Z. So and I didn't know this, my wife told me this the next morning. We had this experience, and then it was beautiful. And then the next day, everything just was like, it's so perfect after and so blissful. And we went into it like with powerful affirmations and lots of notes. We had notepads and we were writing stuff down all night, and we had this beautiful experience. And the next day my wife told me that we should try again, and if we have a son, let's name him Orez, O-R-E-Z. And I'm like, Orez, is that even a name? And she's like, it's 0 backwards. It's very powerful. It's a perfect number. It's meant to be that way. And I was like, okay. So we go home. We have this beautiful, like I said, this beautiful experience. Like, it's so hard to describe it to people that have not gone through it. And it was powerful for us as a couple. It reunited us in so many ways, like, so many powerful ways. And so we go home and we start trying to have a baby. And so my wife gets pregnant. And it was, okay, we're pregnant again. And, at first you're kind of nervous, like, take a deep breath. Like, do we fall in love right away? Because if it doesn't work out, like, it's going to be a big loss right now. It's going to be huge. And so we fall in love with our baby. And our first 2 births, my daughter and my son, we had a natural home birth with both of them, with a midwife. And so we call our midwife that we had our son with 10 years ago. We're pregnant again, because we had called her before when we had the miscarriage, and we're back again. We're pregnant again, And so she takes us into her fold, and we start seeing her, and my wife's doing great, and the baby's doing awesome, and everything's perfect. So my wife decided, let's not get an ultrasound. Let's just go through this pregnancy. I don't want to get an ultrasound. I feel like everything's perfect. I can feel it as a woman. I can feel it. Okay. And so we get about 26 weeks into the pregnancy, and she's measuring real big. She looks real big, like bigger than my son or daughter, but it's actually a 4th pregnancy now because of the miscarriage. And, women tend to get bigger sometimes they show earlier, right? But she's measuring real big. And so we're at 26 weeks, and our midwife says, I want you to go get an ultrasound today because I kind of feel like I hear 2 heartbeats in there. Oh, that's crazy. Like twins? We were like, oh my God, seriously? So we go, my wife and I and my son and daughter, we all go in to get an ultrasound, and it's twins. And he says, you're going to have 2 boys. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're having 2 boys. And so things start to change. We have to kind of shift our whole reality now, because we're going to have 2 babies now. Oh my God, we're going to have 4 kids. This is wild. This is wild. But you can't have a home birth in Colorado if you're having twins. So now we have to go into the medical model, which is fine. We're okay with that. We're kind of hippy-dippy, but, we had 2 natural home births, but, this isn't ideal. But we can still have our midwife there with us. We'll have our doctors, and we'll make it into a beautiful experience. And so we go through the pregnancy, and coronavirus hits. This just happened. And it's like, well, your midwife can't be there now. Thankfully, I can be there. We went and got an ultrasound, and baby A is breached. So it's feet down now, right? Which you can't birth a baby. You can birth the baby like that. If one is breached, they can usually get one out, you know what I mean? But it's going to be, it's a little bit more of a challenge to have a natural birth now. And then we get an ultrasound a little bit closer to the birth date, and now both babies are breached. So we're going to have to get a C-section now, which was kind of the exact opposite of kind of where we started from. But, we're going to roll with this, and, we're going to make it happen. And so my wife went into labor on April 5th, that night, or April 6th, actually. It was in the middle of the night, about 2:30 in the morning. She broke her water, and we got in the car. Actually, it's kind of funny because we had to go to the hospital. My wife hates when I drive. She just absolutely hates it. So she's in labor driving our car to the hospital, right? Dude, women are so powerful, right? Dude, we're so weak. She drives us to the hospital and she gives birth. Baby A comes out. It's a girl. The ultrasound was wrong. We ended up having a girl and a boy. And so, yeah, that we just had twins on April 6th. We were in the hospital for a week through this whole Corona thing. It was pretty wild. You know, we were pretty much on lockdown in our room. We couldn't leave our room. But our babies are home now. They're amazing. We have a son and a daughter. We have a son named Orez, and we have a daughter named Zamira. And they're just like, God, man, like the ultimate gift from the universe. Like, namaste, thank you, God. Like, it all worked out perfect. And, you know, it was, you know, a lot. And, you know, so the mushrooms were an impetus to all of this, you know, for a huge healing as a couple in so many ways. And, yeah, brought this beautiful gift into these two beautiful gifts into her life.
Such a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. Yeah. And congratulations on the twins. That's awesome.
Yeah, so we twin babies right now, so there's not a lot of sleep going on, but it's all worth it and it's all perfect, you know. As much as, like, you know, you don't sleep a lot, there's something beautiful about a baby just being in the present moment. It wakes up and it cries, you know, and it's okay because that's the perfect present moment that, you know, this baby presents in our life constantly, and it's beautiful, every aspect of it, you know. It's not easy, it's a challenge, but the beautiful one now.
Yeah, it's incredible. I definitely want to ask you about fatherhood too, but before we move on to that, there's a couple of things you mentioned in your mushroom experience, and one question too. When you guys were using it, did you stay in your hotel room or did you guys go off into nature too?
So we started out outside. It's kind of funny, actually. We started out outside. We went up, we found this cool little area that we scoped out, like behind this hotel. And it was like all kind of woods and stuff and outside. And we started out outside, and we were just kind of chilling out. You know, we had a bunch of mushrooms and stuff. And then it started coming on, and I was like, whoa, I think something's happening right now. Because all of a sudden the bark looked everything just looked like in high def, you know, everything just looked different and felt different. And for my first experience, I didn't know what I was going to experience. I was prepared for anything. And so we started out outside and we hung out kind of at dusk, you know, as the sun was going down, and watched the sunset and kind of played in the dirt and hung out a little bit. And then we started getting really kind of feeling it. And we were both like, I think we should go back to our room right now. I don't think we should stay out here anymore. So the walk back was pretty interesting because we had to pass by a whole bunch of people, and you're just kind of yeah, we're cool. We're cool right now. We're not acting weird at all. We're just totally cool right now. We're just going to go ahead and walk by you. I don't know what's going on with the floor right there right now. It looks like it's kind of warped and sinking, but we're going to go ahead and make our way to our room right now. So we were you know, kind of freaked out a little bit walking back, but we got back to our room okay, and pretty much just chilled out in that space the whole night. It just seemed like the right place to be for us, and it just felt good there and safe. So it was great.
Yeah, that's something I'm exploring right now in my current research at CSU is the aspect of felt or perceived safety during those experiences, right? And how that dramatically influences the type of experience you're going to have. And you know, they talk about set and setting, and they mention safety, but you know, I think that's a major component. Another thing you mentioned too about, you know, and this is something I hear all the time from people who are new to psychedelics, is they're kind of like, well, I don't know where to find that stuff, or I don't know, you know, I don't want to be a drug dealer or get in trouble for buying it. And so my advice always is, you know, do your research, exactly what you did. Do your research and just start talking to people you encounter about mushrooms. Just say hey, you know, I read this thing, or I heard this thing on NPR, and, you know, it's really interesting. And, you know, when you put it out there into the universe, someone is going to hear it and be inspired to share with you, right? And that's how you find it. You know, you put that intention out there, and the medicine will come to you when you're ready for it. And that's something we're working on right now on the psilocybin panel, actually, is trying to delineate in the legislature, in the law, the difference between selling mushrooms to people, because that's illegal. But we want a clause in there where you can gift mushrooms to someone, because that's really what this is. We're not about a corporate model trying to profit off of these medicines. This is something given to us by the earth. It's been with us since before mankind, and it should be a gift to someone. So we're trying to work that into the law right now, where you can give it and not be at risk for legal action.
And it's been, throughout time so available to us. Yeah. It's not like it didn't require fire. It didn't require a whole bunch of concoctions or things that had to go together. It was right there to pick and eat. I mean, what a gift that is, right? Like it was made for us. Mm-hmm. It is a medicine for us. And so to deny its purpose, it's crazy.
And cannabis too. They're both master medicines, good for so many different things. And if you look back in the history, back at Nancy Reagan and all that stuff, the DARE programs, visit your brain on drugs, it's all propaganda trying to, restrict the citizenry's ability to access higher levels of consciousness or to access other frames of reference, other states of mind, because, the government and media wants people to think a certain way so that they can control society and certain outcomes, and psychedelics blow that wide out into the open, and they don't like that.
And it feels like we're kind of in this rebirth period with it now too, where it's becoming more accepted. For the first time, it's like decriminalized, in a few places, and so it's available now. At least you're not going to go to jail for it, and it's not like it doesn't have to be some a drug deal. Yeah, and feel that way too, kind of feel like dirty like that. Like it's like I'm doing something wrong, or like that we can't just talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's such a powerful tool.
So what is your take on the mixture of cannabis and jiu-jitsu, and also the mixture of psychedelics and jiu-jitsu?
I think it's a personal thing. I don't have like an agenda with that with people. Like I don't tell my students like you should smoke weed, or you should do mushrooms, or you shouldn't. I don't really talk about it, I know what it's done for me, but I also don't hide from it either. Some people do talk about it with me. Some students do talk about it, or ask me a question about it, and I will just honestly share what it's done for me. Cannabis has helped me a lot, probably more than anything. Before cannabis, I was taking, medicine for depression, and it was honestly like, and some of that stuff helps a lot of people, but it wasn't helping me. It was ruining my sex life. It was turning me into a zombie. I felt disconnected. I felt alone. I don't think it was helping. And so when I finally stopped using this prescription medicine, and that's not for everybody. Some people, like I said, it may really help them a lot, but cannabis was a better alternative for me. I could do it in a healthy way. It's not illegal, at least here in Colorado. And I know, and it was helping me truly, like taking off the edge and allowing me to not like just, okay, I'm not going to go smoke a bunch of weed and just like zone out and eat Frito-Lays. For me, it's like a rocket launcher. It gets me going. It's a starting point if I need it. If I don't need it, that's fine. But if I do need it, it's a medicine, and it's there, and it's going to help me move to the next place. It's going to allow me to be creative. Like, a lot of my jiu-jitsu, it's different. It's different than a lot of people's, I see things differently. And I think sometimes it's, cannabis helps me with that. It opens up my creative opportunities. It helps me explore in a way that maybe I don't normally, or at least did in the first half of my life. So I think it can be very helpful for people. I think it's a tool. I think you should use it as, if you want to use it as a starting point, not a place to like fall into, but a place to take you somewhere to get things, to be, accomplish things. Same thing with psychedelics. Psychedelics are different. People that have never done it don't realize you're not going to get addicted to psychedelics. You're not going to want to do psychedelics all the time. If I'm going to do, and I've done subsequent trips since that other trip, but I kind of have to I have to definitely be in the right mindset and setting to do it, because I also realized there's a few days of recovery after, not just from a physical standpoint about how I feel physically, but emotionally too. Like there's a lot that goes into that. And if I'm going to take this experience that's so powerful and integrate it into my life now, there's going to be a lot of soul searching that's going to happen after that. I'm going to need some space after. I'm going to need some time. I'm going to need to draw and write. And I'm going to need to ask myself these questions. And I'm going to need to like try to formulate what exactly happened in that experience so that I can use that in my life now. I don't use it like, yeah, man, I want to just go trip out and, you know, see pretty lights and stuff. And that's fine. You know, that's fine, you know, for an experience for some people. But I use it like, okay, if I'm going to do this right now, there's, you know, I want to get something from this experience because it's going to be powerful. Because when I go into a trip, it's like, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of conversation that's happening. And, you know, I need probably a sitter with me too. Like I like to have my wife there so that she could like, you know, relate something and she's, you know, not using it and she can help me integrate some of this experience into my life or things that I talk about or the conversation that were happening during this, that we can remember this the next day. Cause it is kind of like a dream sometimes, isn't it? Like sometimes the dream starts to fade really quick.
Yeah, it's like
you wake up in the morning, but halfway through the day, it's kind of gone.
Yeah, it's like 1,000 years of information in
all at once, pouring in there, right? Like, and you're trying to make sense of all of this that's happening. And what's the lesson here? What is this about right now?
Yeah, the integration piece is, in my opinion, more important than the trip itself. And we can, you know, I'm a psychedelic integration therapist as well. And so that's, you know, I try and use those same techniques to integrate every experience, you know, whether it's a jiu-jitsu roll where I just got, you know, beat by my professor. You know, I want to take a couple minutes and sit there and integrate what just happened. What was my emotional response? What was going through my mind? How do I make this better? And, you know, that's so important in every aspect, especially with, you know, the psychedelics too. And you and I are both what's called psychiatric survivors. So we were both been on, you know, depression medication and found that that's just not the path for us. And it actually did more harm than it did any good. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there who are currently on medications and don't want to be, you know, they want to find an alternative route. And this is just one of those alternative routes. Others are like meditation or martial arts or, you know, starting a family or whatever it is for you. You know, finding your own way, finding your own pathway through this.
And I think that these medicines have a way to, you know, it's not an instant thing, but it can be like a quantum leap, quicker and more efficient too. You know, like I said, I've never been able to sit in meditation. You know, when I was a kid in school, I was put in special ed through like 7th grade on. You know, I was told that, you know, I can't do this. I was told that my teachers, I remember sitting at a final exam and I'd have my teacher next to me because I could always have a teacher there because I was in special ed to answer any questions. They would just fill in all the answers for me. They would just take my final exam for me and just kept pushing me through. And, you know, I'd been through like a lot of depression and all of that. And so like these traditional things weren't really working for me, you know, the traditional Western medicine things, you know, seeing a therapist and, you know, taking medicine, and the medicine was making me feel worse and it was messing up my relationship with my wife and, you know, felt so disconnected from it. So these beautiful medicines that, you know, were given to us that have been here since the beginning of time have been huge for me. Just completely life shifting, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Me too. And I personally love the coming marriage between cannabis and jiu-jitsu and psychedelics and jiu-jitsu. I've been an athlete my whole life, played multiple sports, and I've never played a sport where I could really marry two of my passions. And now, you know, jiu-jitsu is sort of opening up to this idea of you know, just being open to that. And
it's more prevalent in jiu-jitsu than people talk about. You know what I mean? Like I used to think like I would be around some of the highest level people in jiu-jitsu and, you know, have them come in for a seminar and the first thing they would ask me, we're going to get some weed. You know what I mean? And you're like, really? You smoke weed? Like at first I was like, that's weird because I was like, you know, again, of that generation that, you know, just say no. And like a lot of the Brazilians, you know, use marijuana and cannabis. And so like, you start to little by little realize when you start talking to people about it, you start realizing like almost everybody does it. You know, not everybody, but a lot, you know, for sure. And there's
Yeah.
still like probably some people that are very judgmental about it too, you know.
Yeah, I
And
was
have an agenda to tell people that they should all smoke weed or something like that, or do mushrooms. I think it's a personal choice, and I think if you're ready for that, maybe it can help you, or you know, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, I was super surprised to learn that. So I trained under Master Silvio Bering for a little while, Coral Belt, and super surprised. Same thing happened. You know, I went to go train with him in Park City, and he's like, "Oh, you're from Colorado, right?" And we smoked a joint together, and it was amazing. And now, you know, he's so much more than an instructor to me, but we've become friends. You know, I've had him on the podcast, and he speaks very openly about it. He's interested in doing ayahuasca down in Brazil and things like that. And so you're right, it is more prevalent in jiu-jitsu than people realize. Almost like you know, surfer culture. You know, if you think of surfer culture, you know, everybody's getting stoned. Even, you know, I competed in a tournament called the High Rollers, where it's all about you know, smoking weed and jiu-jitsu. So you smoke a joint with your opponent before you roll. And we had it in the Cannabis church in Denver, and it was an all-day thing, and the whole church was just full of smoke all day long. It was pretty intense. But I've also, you know, I've trained and I've competed on microdoses too, and found that microdosing psychedelics incorporated with jiu-jitsu is another tool to let me realize what potentials that I have in my body, in my movement, that I don't recognize on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, there's just that. It's so easy to be like when you're normally training, and if you're not, you know, like with marijuana, it can open up different pathways and different things that you don't always see, and it can relax your body in a way that maybe you normally can. Or if you have a lot of anxiety, or you're feeling that, you know, a lot of people, you know, in jiu-jitsu, when they start, there's a lot of jiu-jitsu anxiety for people, a lot of fear around it. You know, they may never say it, like, but when they come to class, they're terrified. So maybe that's something that, you know, for somebody that could take the edge off for them, and maybe make the training a little bit easier, you know, to get through some things for them. You know, I can only speak from my experience of what it's done for me. And you know, like, it's been very helpful in so many ways.
So let's talk about your jiu-jitsu style for a little bit, because that's something that like really fascinates me, and why I was drawn to you. I mean, there's so many black belts out there now, but even before you moved to Colorado, I was drawn to you and your style, because not only did you incorporate the spiritual aspect, but just your style, you know, I would consider it like a flow style. I'm wondering if you can describe for me how you describe your own style, because you're with it every day.
I like, you know, I'm open to all realities, and I always say that I'm open to all realities. So if and I'm open to all realities in the sense that I can learn from anyone. You know, I'll see a kid in class, and they'll do something like that normally would be considered completely wrong. And I go, wait a second, let me see that again, that wrong thing. And I'll see something so right about it, that there's something there that maybe that's not the move. Maybe I'm saying, go for the armbar, but they go to this side of the arm and they throw the leg over the head, and it looks different. Then I'm like, wait a sec, maybe that's an omoplata from there that I never thought about before, right? Or some other technique that maybe like I hadn't thought about. So I'm always open to looking for opportunities. Where can I learn? And part of that's a natural extension of who I am. I'm a tinkerer as a person. Like, I like to tinker. I like to like take things apart and put them back together again. When I was a kid, I just like to start taking shit apart. I couldn't always put it back together again, but I like to take stuff apart and try to figure out, well, how does that even work? So I'm very curious about things, and I've never lost that. And jiu-jitsu's accentuated it more than anything, that childlike curiosity of wanting to like take things apart and figure them out and figure out more ways to do it. So I always have, I call it my ABCs, always be creative. And I try to extend that into my life too. How can I be creative in the moment right now? And jiu-jitsu allows you for that. Like, you could be rolling, and if you're open to it, you ever have those moments when you're grappling with somebody and like you do this weird kind of cool thing that you can't even remember afterwards, and you're like, oh shit, that was so sick. What the frick was that, man? Holy crap, I wish I could remember it. Well, I try to remember those things. I try to take moments after and say, okay, stop. What was that? Sometimes I can't. Sometimes I just have to appreciate it for the little wisp of smoke that it is. And sometimes I have to like delve into it for a moment and go, wait a second, what was that? Let's play with that for a minute. And so a lot of our training here at our academy is after class. We'll just tinker, man. We'll just get together and play around with moves and come up with stuff. And something will start one way and become something different. And then also, you know, here you're thinking it's this. And then by the time you get to the end of it, you figure out it's actually this. And so there's these constant evolutions that keep happening for me. And I never get tired of that. I never stop at where I start from. So I'm always trying to find new moves, and it never ends for me. I'm playing around with stuff right now that I've been teaching on Zoom. Like the last month, all my classes have been online. I can't tell you how much new cool stuff I've come up with. Just working with my stupid grappling dummy, coming up with crazy collar chokes and all kinds of cool shit that you know, I don't take credit for like inventing stuff. Like jiu-jitsu, you don't really invent stuff. It's kind of like, I call it the Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin did not invent electricity, discovered it. It was always there, discovered it, right? I'm discovering something that probably someone else discovered, you know, might even discovered a long time ago. You know, sometimes you think you figured something new out and you see a picture of somebody doing it 50 years ago. You know, it's all the same stuff, but it's my personal discovery. So I'm always looking, I'm always on the lookout for something new. And I like finding ways I get excited about finding weird ways to use my body. You know, find new, weird, creative ways. How can I use my legs? You know, people are always like, oh, you're so flexible. I wasn't always this flexible that I am now. More flexible at 51 than I was at 41. And I was more flexible at 41 than I was at 31. It's constantly trying to evolve my own flexibility because I like to stretch. I love the feeling of being flexible. There's nothing better in your jiu-jitsu than when you get your hips opened up for the first time and they're open now. And you can move your body in a way that maybe you couldn't move before. I was born flexible, but I wasn't flexible for a large part of the first part of my life doing martial arts. I was always like, in Taekwondo, man, I could never do the splits. I was so inflexible. I hated it. I was like, I'm not flexible. I remember as a kid buying one of those stretch machines. You ever see those? Sit in it and it cranks your legs out like some freaking medieval torture device. I was like 15 and I wanted to order one of those. So I had my parents write a check for like $75 and I ordered this stretch machine. I used to sit in it every night and watch like martial arts and kung fu movies, trying to be like Van Damme or something. But I never was flexible before. Now people see me, they're like, that's all they talk about is how flexible I am. And it's really like, it's a practice though. I have to stretch every day. And I love the feeling of stretching. And then when you start to become more flexible in jiu-jitsu, it creates more opportunities for you. Right? Like the more you can develop a certain skill set, the more you can use it now. So the more flexible I can become, the more cool shit I can start to do. So I like to stretch more than I like to do probably most things. And I stretch more than I roll. I stretch every day. I don't roll every day, but I stretch every day. Yeah, so that's a key component for me.
It's interesting too, like, and I'm so glad that you're putting up those Zoom videos, but it's so interesting now during that lockdown and everything. A lot of us in the jiu-jitsu world felt a lot of sadness, not being able to train, things like that. And it's been difficult trying to find motivation sometimes. We just opened our gym like 2 weeks ago, but we're still maintaining social distance, no physical contact, got to wear a mask while we're working out. I'm wondering, like, what's the status of your gym right now? How are you doing classes?
We just started opening up this week a little bit. Like this week was kind of we called it our phase 1 soft opening, where we just wanted to, like, I needed to figure out, because it's usually my wife and I, like she's a brown belt, so she usually covers half the classes, but for the last, 9-10 months, she's been pregnant, so she hasn't been able to teach. So it was kind of me just coming back. We're a family-owned business, and this is, it's not easy to get through this stuff, and you're closed for a few months, and it's not easy for any small business, regardless of what it is. But jiu-jitsu is not like, we didn't start this to get rich. We did this because this is a passion project that we made into our life, but it's how both of us, make our income. So it, wasn't easy getting through all of this, but thank God our students have been so supportive and so amazing. And we've had so much great support around us. We came back to it this week, just myself. I ran just a couple classes, just Tuesday and Thursday. And it was the same thing like you're speaking of, social distancing, masks, the whole thing, temperatures at the door, trying to be safe. But it was so cathartic for everybody, students and myself. Like, it was like, yeah, like it was cool on Zoom doing this. Thank God that we have this modern miracle and this technology to do that. Because, 15 years ago, man, it would have really sucked. But I liked the Zoom experience though. I enjoyed it actually. It challenged me as an instructor, like in a whole different way. Like, and I actually found like students were actually picking up stuff strangely quicker. Like I could see them right in front of me on my screen. I could see everything that they were doing and watching so closely that and it was forcing me to really walk them through the details. Versus I think sometimes in the day-to-day reality of the school, I can be a lazy instructor and they could be lazy students. But on Zoom, we weren't able to be lazy with each other. We were like, right there in front of each other, making it happen. We couldn't grapple, and we still can't grapple, but that's okay. If someone came to you 3 months ago and they were like, all right, Shane, I want you just to work technique for the next 3 months and just stretch, no grappling. You would have been like, oh, dude, I can't do that. I got to go to class. I got to have my fix, man. I got to roll. But if you'd actually done that, some pretty awesome results might happen. You might actually like develop better technique. You might get more flexible than you've ever been. So I looked at this as like a really good opportunity for all of us to, maybe just change how we train for a couple months. We'll get back to it eventually, but it's not the end of the world. It's an opportunity, all of us, being home for a few months. What a great opportunity to fall in love with the people within your arm's reach. Pretty cool, right? We use this phrase social distancing now, right? Could you imagine like 3 months ago? I don't think I've ever even heard that phrase before. Social what? Social distancing. It doesn't have to be social distancing. Like, doesn't mean we don't socialize and communicate anymore. Maybe we would just do it in a different way for a little bit, It is different, right? Like wearing masks. You don't even get to see the smile anymore. We were joking around. I was telling all the adults here last night. So just so you guys know, this is a smile. This is the frown if the technique doesn't look good. And this is me being bewildered, just joking around. Like, it's weird that we can't actually like see each other's faces. It sort of feels a little dehumanizing sometimes. I saw this we were watching this nature show at home, and they were training these baby monkeys, right? They were orphaned from their mother, and they were little baby monkeys. And all of these people that were training or taking care of these monkeys, not training them, taking care of them, they wore masks because they said, they don't want the monkeys to see their facial expressions because they become humanized now. So I thought that was, wow, I was like, that's pretty crazy. That's like exactly what we're going through right now. We're dehumanizing ourselves, social distancing, dehumanizing, the persona, the mask behind the mask. It's wild.
I hate that term too, social distancing. I think it should have been called physical distancing from the beginning, because just the term social distancing, again, as a control tactic maybe is meant to promote people isolating each other or isolating from each other. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a weird set of phrases that we're coming up with now, like social distancing and, strange times we're in, or the new normal. You know what I mean? Like these phrases that like, we don't know what to call it. We don't know what to call this right now. We don't want to say it's a scary time or a weird time. We say interesting times we're in.
Yeah.
It is. Maybe it's, it's a time of growth right now. It's like if you get injured in jiu-jitsu, right? Like you get injured and you can't train. It's an opportunity now to reflect, to reflection. When I've had injuries over the years, it was an opportunity for reflection. And so I'm grounded for a moment. And there's a reason for my grounding for a moment, to take a pause, see what I can learn from this. How can I take advantage of this opportunity in a positive way of growth for myself and everybody around me?
Yeah, looking at every situation, regardless of how much control you have in it or not, as a time for growth, as long as you can find that little nugget of growth, for sure. I know that this time has really pushed me as an instructor, because I'm used to teaching people how to do things with physical contact. And so now I'm trying to figure out like, well, how do I teach people jiu-jitsu without, maybe one of the most important components? And so now we're focusing a lot on like fundamental movements, animal flow movements, inverted balancing, all sorts of strengthening exercises, so that when we do get to roll, people are still, maybe they're moving better. I can't teach submissions right now, but maybe, maybe they're able to sweep better or transition more easily or have more confidence in the fundamental movements, for sure.
Yeah, it allows us as instructors to either be resourceful or not. You know, it's like anything in life. You know, you face a challenge, you can just shrivel up and die if you want. You can say it's over. It's the apocalypse. It's over. It's it. I'm never going to have my school again. And you can get sucked into that reality, or you go, okay, how do we make this work right now? And that's, I think, what a lot of us are trying to do. You know, okay, so we got Zoom. We can do Zoom. We'll do that for a little bit, you know. But at some point, we do have to get back in here and get back into reality again and find ways to maybe adapt a little bit and work around this. But we got to get back to jiu-jitsu at some point.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait till I can roll again and to come down there too.
Better now than it's been, right? So we have to be, you know, so grateful right now that, like, oh man, at least we're back in the school right now and we can see our homies again. You know, we can at least, maybe we're not locking up yet, but we can at least be, you know, near each other and share the experience and still, you know, find new ways to adapt and overcome and, you know, find some new skill sets that we can work on.
I tell you what, like before the pandemic, I almost took the tap and or the bump for granted, and now now that we're back, like even a little fist bump with a friend means so much more, right? Because you know, I can't give them a big hug or anything, so that fist bump is really, you know, even the smallest physical contact with friends is so helpful.
Yeah, we take it away for a little bit and we realize just how important it really was for us. You know, I think we've all felt that in the last few months of, like, you know, not being able to see family. You know, we came home with our 2 babies from the hospital, you know, and when our other 2 children were born, it was like everybody was there. Family was there the first night. Sister-in-law slept over and helped us. Everybody was there. We came home from the hospital. We had to tell grandma and grandpa, like, they can't see the kids for at least 2 weeks. You know, my other children, my older children, had to wear masks for the first 2 weeks because they had stayed at grandma and grandpa's and they were around other people. And so we had to be really cautious. And so it was, you know, it's not easy. Like, you know, like normally, like we would have brought twins home and we would have had all of our family there and everybody helping and this and that. But it became like, you know, just us in our house and, you know, getting through this. And now that we're kind of getting back to family and stuff, it's like, I can't tell you how much I appreciate my family right now. My wife, my children, my extended family, grandma and grandpa, mother and father-in-law, you know, brother and sister-in-law, cousins, everybody, like more than I ever have in my life. Like, it's, as a family for us, it's brought us together in a way that I can't remember, you know? And I think it can do that as a community too, if we allow it to. We can get back out in the world and say, wow, man, I really like appreciate being back in the flow of life again. And maybe we can approach it in a different way than we did before. Because a lot of things got put on pause and all of a sudden we're seeing things differently. Like, you know, you're hearing stories about, like, you know, more animals coming back into communities and pollution going away and like stuff that's like really like we would have never been able to pull off as a culture before. But we had to put the brakes on for a minute, and maybe the brakes on was a good thing.
Yeah, I think in the end, hopefully, my hope is that we take the opportunity to learn.
Yeah. We can. I can and you can.
Yeah.
That's where it starts. You know, maybe, you know, we can be like that small seed, you know, to make things happen. And individually we can start doing it and something starts to happen. But we have to first, you know, as human beings, being a human, not human doing, how we can be the impetus of change on an individual basis. That's where it starts, right?
Yeah, it all starts with taking personal responsibility for sure.
Yeah.
So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about fatherhood with you, because it's something that I look forward to so much. I tell my wife, you know, I want a clan of jiu-jitsu babies, you know. I think originally we were thinking 5, but now she's talked me down to 2. But we're going to start next year, and I'm wondering how, you know, I've asked this question to lots of fathers who've come on my show, and they told me about how fatherhood has completely, you know, shifted who they are as a person, responsibility-wise, career-wise, all that stuff. I'm wondering for you, with your backgrounds and insights from like psychedelics and jiu-jitsu and spirituality and all these things sort of combining within you, how do you approach fatherhood, and what has that experience been like for you? Because it seems like it would be the craziest trip of your life.
Craziest. It's the most, it's profound. It's profound on a level that it's hard to like explain, you know, hard to explain to somebody that, you know, for them to get it when you don't have kids yet. Right. So it's great that you're having these conversations as you prepare yourself for fatherhood. When I didn't have kids before, you know, my daughter's 14, but pre-kids, I wanted kids bad. Like, I love teaching kids, man. I've been teaching kids since I can remember, and it's like the most enjoyable part of teaching for me. Like, I love teaching the little kids, and the younger, the better. Like, I love the little 4 and 5-year-olds. They're freaking hilarious. They like pick up jujitsu, like, you know, like they just pick it right up, dude. They're so intuitive with it. Like, they just kind of do it. Like, if you took 2 little 4-year-olds and you said, just wrestle with each other, they start doing the coolest shit, and they don't even know what they're doing. And they're like throwing stuff on that's so natural and normal. Right. So I've always like enjoyed teaching kids, and I knew that I wanted to be a father from a young age, I think. And so like, for me, it's been absolutely amazing. It's been amazing raising a daughter. You know, she's 14, and it's fun seeing her evolve into a young woman now. And my son, who's 10, seeing him growing up into be a young man now, and starting all over again right now. Already back from the beginning now, you know, 10 years later after having my son with 2 new ones now. So for me, it's like, it's the most powerful thing you will experience in your life. It's the most challenging thing you'll experience in your life too. And it's interesting going back to it again with just little infant babies. They're so amazing to look at, and they're just so pure. Like, they completely rely on you for everything, every moment. And there's something beautiful about that, and a beautiful connection that is birthed because of that. You know, our little babies can't be alone for a moment. You know, you see animals born into nature, and like, they're small and little for a very short period of time, and they're pretty much on their own pretty quick. And little babies take a long time, you know? And so there's a pretty amazing bond that happens there. And it's been cool watching my kids do jujitsu. You know, my daughter started when she was like 4, basically like, shit, when she was an infant, I was throwing her up on my feet. And even with my new ones, I'm like, armbar, come on, jab cross, baseball bat grips, come on, baseball bat, you know what I mean? Just playing around with their little hands and stuff. So my kids have always done jujitsu. It's kind of like all we've ever known as a family. My wife is a brown belt. My daughter is going to be a blue belt here in a few years. She's 14. My son's 10. He's been doing it since he was little. So watching your kids do martial arts and being their instructor the entire time has been a pretty cool experience. And there's been so many good lessons in there too, of just allowing them to have their own experience and just putting my dogma and my version of jiu-jitsu, present it to them, but allow them to be whoever they're going to be on the mats, and allow it to be a good, healthy experience for them. I remember like my daughter at one point when she was like younger, you know, she pull guard all the time. So she'd drop on her back and pull them in the guard. Drove me crazy. I don't want to raise a guard puller. I want my daughter to take people down. You know what I mean? So I would watch her grapple, and I'd be her coach too. And I wouldn't say anything, but I would watch and be like, oh, I don't want her to freaking do takedowns. Come on, take them down, right? Why are you pulling guard? And then, you know, I just kind of let it go and watched her. And then, you know, one day she hit a double leg takedown, and she got really good at them. And then when she would go to tournaments, she would just crush kids on takedowns. You know, she was really good at takedowns. But I had to allow her to have her own experience and allow her the space to grow in a way that she wants to grow in jiu-jitsu. Just like, could you imagine if you were training and like somebody was standing near you telling you what you should be doing all the time and judging your jiu-jitsu, right? You'd be like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. And so I think as parents, as coaches, you know, whether it's jiu-jitsu or baseball or soccer or whatever it happens to be, I think it's really important to allow your children to have their own experience with it. And, you know, even like forever, when we finish class, we've always done this with our children. The only thing we ask them about class is there anything you want to share? So when class is done, if we're in the car, how was class? Anything you want to share? No. Okay. Yes. Then we'll talk about it. Versus, hey, yeah, so I was watching you today, and I noticed you were constantly pulling guard. Or I noticed that one kid was on top of you, crushing you, and you look like you were upset about that. Is everything okay? Are you okay? They might have already moved on and forgot. That was nothing to them. That was just like, you know, part of the experience. But it's so easy as a parent to like force our, you know, one path on our kids, like, because maybe we didn't do that, or we're worried about we have some weird fear about, like, you know, whatever, but pulling guard or takedowns or something weird, versus just allowing them to have the experience and enjoy it, and no pressure. And I think that's why my kids have been able to do it happily ever since they were little. They don't complain about jiu-jitsu. They don't fight with us about it. They don't say they don't want to go. They just, it's just kind of what our life is. It's jiu-jitsu tonight. It's not every night. They don't need to do it 7 days a week, nor do I need to do it 7 days a week. I teach 7 days a week, but I don't train 7 days a week. I have a healthy balance with jiu-jitsu, and I allow my kids to have a healthy balance because it's not about them doing this right now. It's about them doing this their whole life. When they were younger, they competed a bunch, and then we haven't really done any competitions in quite a while, years now. And I don't think there's anything wrong with competitions, but I also don't want to ever be that parent that forces my kids to constantly go to tournaments all the time. I've taught those kids. I've seen those kids. I've had kids where their dad drives them to every tournament in the country, every month, constantly. And most of those kids, what happens to them?
Yeah, they don't like jiu-jitsu after a while.
Hate it. They burn out, right? They don't want to do it anymore. And at the end of the day, those experiences can be good, but if they're doing 1,000 tournaments by the time they're 15, it's probably not sustainable, right? It's you see competitive gymnastics a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody's doing gymnastics when they're 30. They might teach it, but they're not doing gymnastics still. Even wrestling, right? I love wrestling, but what 30-year-olds go and wrestle anymore? You do it up until it's a sport in college or something, and then you're so banged up from it, right? Because it wasn't really a sustainable thing. So I've tried to, as a father, probably the best lesson as a father and teacher of my children is just allowing them to have the experience for themselves so that we can do this for, the rest of our lives.
Yeah, I like that. My wife and I have come up with 3 main rules that we're going to hold our family to when we have it. One is you got to stick with jiu-jitsu until you're at least a blue belt.
Yeah.
No country music in the house. and if you want to ever do drugs, come talk to us first.
Yeah.
And so my question for you is how do you strike up a balance between, forcing a kid down a path, our first rule, right? You got to do jiu-jitsu until a blue belt. Well, part of me feels I don't want to force my kid into my passion just because it's my passion, but I also see all the benefits that can come from it, especially from a young age. And so I want to navigate that balance. I'm wondering how have you and obviously you have a school, so it's a little easier. How do you incorporate your kids into the mix? Do you bring them to the jiu-jitsu gym since they're infants and just expose them to the environment this is a normal thing? Or do you have sit down talks with them about the importance? How do you do that and get them interested in what you're interested in?
Yeah, and I think it's for us, it's as a family, it's always just been what our life is. So it never feels like it's something that we have to go to, right? It just feels like it's part of life. I think it's important to bring them into the school early, let them play on the mats, let them have fun. And it's going to be different for each kid, what age you're going to start them at. My daughter was ready for jiu-jitsu at 3.5, 4. That was kind of her though. She walked really early. She was speaking really clear. She was done with diapers early. It was kind of wasn't a surprise. My son, I tried him at 4. He wasn't ready at 4. We tried class, the school that we were teaching at, they offered classes. He was 4. We put him in there and he just started crying every class. And I wanted him to remember jiu-jitsu as a positive experience, not as that we forced him and he cried. We forced him and he cried. So we tried it a couple times. He wasn't ready for it. So we said, let's wait until he's 5. Let's keep, he'll always be at the school because we were teaching there and stuff. But we're not going to get him in organized classes and everything. We'll get him a uniform if he wants to play around in it. But we're not going to do classes yet. Let's wait till he's 5. So his path was different than my daughter's. And we recognized that. And it was important that we did recognize that. Because I tell parents that all the time. Every parent, you probably experience this too, wants to start the kid at 3. I get calls sometimes. My daughter just turned 2. You mean 2 years old? She's only been alive for 2 years? No, we're not ready yet. I said, I always tell people I used to try to start kids at 3.5. I don't even mess around with it anymore. I start them at about 4, but I tell parents, I don't take everybody at 4. They got to be able to come in and they got to be able to do class. And they got to be able to interact with the coaches and be able to speak and stuff. And, they got to have a good, fun experience. If they come in and they're crying, I'll give it a couple classes if they're crying, try to help them along because some kids need just a little bit of that. Sometimes get that out of them and then they're okay. But then there's some kids that aren't ready for it yet. And I'd rather them come back when they're 5, when we know they're going to be ready and they're going to have a good experience. Because if I ruin it right now for them at 4, they're never coming back again. And they're never going to do it the rest of their life. And if it's your kid and you're pushing them, guess what? They're going to resent you for it too. And it's never going to be a good experience for anybody. So let's wait until they're actually ready before we start them. And so for me, it was like making sure we start them at the right point and make it fun for them too. And the tricky part for me was like, I'm not just like dad on the sidelines, I'm coach on the floor too, and the main coach. So there was some learning stuff there for me too, that like, at first I would say, well, you know, I can't be dad in class. Like, you know, you got to do class, and like everybody else doesn't have their dad in class. So, you know, I got to be like Professor Mike or Coach Mike in class. And then I started to realize, well, that's not fair. Everybody else, they all get like their dad maybe on the sidelines or somewhere giving them the thumbs up and the smiles and stuff, or, you know, giving them positive feedback. But I'm like, no, I'm not dad here now. And then I realized that's not the path either. Like, I need to be there first and foremost for my kids. If they need a hug, and I need to recognize that, I need to go give them a hug. And it's okay for the professor to do that, because first and foremost, our relationship is father-son, father-daughter, not father-student. That's secondary to the actual thing. So honoring and recognizing that was huge for me as both a coach and as a father for my own children, like to allow them to have the experience, but dad's always there for you when you need him too.
How do you think you would have handled it if one of your kids, or maybe one of the twins, decides, you know, jiu-jitsu is not for me, I don't want to do what my parents did?
You know, hopefully that won't happen. It'll never happen. You know, it's weird because it doesn't feel like it would happen because of the way we live our life. Like, jiu-jitsu is just kind of what we do as a family. It's never felt like something that like we all have to do. It's just kind of what we do. And I think that's part of it too. Like, just living, like, we just kind of live as like, you know, we're a bunch of ninjas, man. We just a bunch of ninjas that live in a house together, and we go do jiu-jitsu, and it doesn't feel like it's anything but, and most of their friends are at jiu-jitsu. Like, it's such a part of our life because we have an academy now, and like, it just feels like that's what life is for us. So I guess it's probably easier from that perspective. But if you're not a teacher and you're not a coach and your kids are doing it, I think it's important to present it at the right time and make it fun with no pressure, no judgment. Because we know this, everybody gets good at it, right? Everybody gets good. Doesn't matter where you start from, everybody gets good at it. I've never once seen somebody not get good. I've seen people where I'm like, oh man, maybe this guy won't get good. He's pretty uncoordinated. You're like, oh, I don't know. Like, no, this is just a challenge for me as an instructor. And if you wait long enough and they stick with it long enough, everybody gets good. So there's no point ever putting pressure on people to be something at it, because they're going to figure it out. Everybody does.
Yeah, I love that philosophy. Everyone gets good as long as you stick with it, you know? Yeah. And that, you know,
it's life, right?
Yeah. Well, that reminded me of your situation with the miscarriage and considering, should we have another one? Like, that mushroom experience, it's almost like the universe was telling you, like, Mike, get up off the mat. You've just been tapped out once. Like, don't quit. Like, you got more to do.
And that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
Felt like, yeah, like, you know what? Yeah, we're going to do this. And, you know, what a blessing that we did, because I could not imagine now not having these two little people in my life. And that's what's so powerful about becoming a father, is that, like, you instantly fall in love. You're instantly in love. It's like love at first sight. And you can't imagine they were never there before. I can't imagine that they weren't here before, because everything feels so different now and so amazing that, like, wow, that's crazy. Like, and that not only that, but you created this too. Like, you and your wife came together as a couple and made human life. How fucking crazy is that? That's insane. We can do that. How crazy is that, right? Pretty intense.
Yeah.
So
really
beautiful responsibility and beautiful blessing and gift. And thank you, God.
Yeah. And I want to be respectful of your time too. So, you know, we're nearing the end of our 2 hours, and I want to ask you, you know, if, for all the listeners out there, you know, so this podcast is sort of like my effort to bring, you know, every piece of consciousness, every individual consciousness is like a piece to the puzzle. You know, we're an 8 billion piece puzzle right now, and the podcast is sort of a platform to bring these pieces and start putting the picture together so that all of humanity can start to see that we have these common things, you know, this consciousness that underlies everything. And if you could sum up a piece of Mike Bidwell wisdom for the audience and contribute a piece to this this giant puzzle, what might be that? What would you say to the audience?
I think it's important that we recognize that we are a piece of the puzzle. We're not alone. And it's so easy to, especially right now, social distancing, it's so easy to social distance. And what a gift that's been for us to realize how much we actually love each other. And not being afraid to say that, and not be shamed for saying that, and as men, I don't remember my dad saying that when I was younger. It was when I went in the military and came back from the Gulf War that I really remember my dad telling me he loved me. And it was that space apart of being apart for a year that helped me recognize how much I loved my parents. And so I think this is an opportunity for all of us to fall in love with each other again. And, create a different opportunity as a human race, because it's a very volatile time right now. But it can be, like I said earlier, an apocalypse can be a time where we can reveal something to ourselves. And part of falling in love with each other, and this is, something I really felt like I learned from the mushrooms, was to fall in love with myself. And that there is love for me that's bigger than me. And when you feel that for the first time, it's pretty powerful, right? It's huge. Man. It's like being a baby again. And looking into your parents' eyes and being just instantly in love. Not even knowing what it is, but just being in love.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've never interacted with you in person, just through Zoom this one time. But, I have to say, I love you as a brother. I love you as a fellow jiu-jitsu person. And as a spiritual being, once you can see that love within yourself, that you just know innately that that's in everybody else too,
It's so easy to put up a wall and social distance and put a mask on and not see that, but just knowing that it's there, that what you are me and I am you. And it's easy to forget that you're just another one of me. We get so caught up in our own survival and our own, we have to do it, human doing, instead of human being. But you're me and I'm you. You're just another version of me. And there's a whole bunch of other versions of me. They're all different and they're all beautiful. Instead of, finding ways to separate now, let's celebrate our differences. We all look different. How freaking amazing is that and cool, right? I love that it's Baskin Robbins. Everybody likes something different, right? I love all the different colors and all of it. It's all amazing, dude. Where there's a lot of different colored trees. There's a lot of different colored everything. There's a lot of different things to look at and to connect to. And we're all part of all of it. And it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So we are
right now. We are alive right now. And it's easy to just go through your life. I'm 51, and it's you start kind of thinking about that stuff at 50. I'm not going to live forever. I'm not going to be in this physical body forever. Not forever, but I'm here right now. And it's a place for my consciousness to reside right now. So why not experience all of these beautiful gifts as much as I can right now in this little, very small speck of time right now that I've been given? What a gift to be given. Life.
Yeah, it's the most important gift, and to treasure it too. I think that's a good place to end it on a good note, for sure.
Yeah.
Mike, I want to say thank you again for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I really hope that, once the gyms start opening up more, I want to come down to Denver and train with you guys and see your beautiful place. It looks great on all the pictures, the white mats. That's exactly what I've envisioned for my own gym someday. And to be able to learn from you in person, would be amazing. So, and learn from you, not just jiu-jitsu, but, through this conversation, learn about other aspects of life and consciousness and fatherhood. It's been great. So thank you.
And the reason our school's white is because we look at it like it's our canvas.
Yeah.
The white canvas. Everybody can come in here and create whatever you want.
Yep. It's a blank slate. Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Man.
And
awesome. That was fun.
Yeah, and for the listeners out there, keep listening. And until next time, this has been Conversations with the Mind.
Conversations with the Mind podcast is sponsored by mindops.com. You can find us at www.mind-ops.com. We're an eclectic counseling company providing mental health and mental performance services to individuals, small and large groups, teams, businesses, military, through face-to-face sessions or at a distance using phone or confidential video chat apps. We bring a unique Buddhist Western lens and specialize in general psychotherapy for all mental difficulties, sport and performance psychology for performance enhancement, addiction counseling for any maladaptive or destructive habits, and psychedelic integration therapy to make the most from your visionary medicine work. We are available as well for corporate workshops to address the needs of your employees' wellness.